The Phin podcast, brought to you by Gainsborough Dolphins Swimming Club, all striving to achieve our swimming potential. Episode 1. The Road to Nationals with your hosts, Ben Ambrose and Lydia Smith.
Take your marks.
Hello and welcome to Gainsborough Dolphins' brand new podcast, The Phin. This is the place where you can find swimming tips, stories and a whole lot of fun. Before we begin, I shall introduce my amazing co-host and guest for episode 1. She is a member of the Gainsborough Dolphins coaching team, a former Nationals medalist and a newly qualified judge. It's Lydia Smith.
Hello.
And joining me in the studio, we are very, very lucky to have our next guest who has travelled all the way from university. She is a former member of the Gainsborough Dolphins family. She is also a national swimmer and currently swims for the City of Manchester Aquatics. It's Amelia Osborne.
Hi.
How does it feel to be back?
It feels good. It's weird, but it's good. It's definitely, I've missed it. It's changed a lot, and there's not many people that I used to swim with still here, but it's nice to see familiar faces.
Let's start by answering some fairly easy questions before we get to the nitty-gritty. First of all, if I could ask you both, what do you feel is your favourite stroke to swim, and maybe your favourite event as well?
My favourite stroke to swim is probably butterfly. I know, bit of a rare one. My favourite event's probably the 200 breaststroke long course.
My favourite stroke is backstroke, and my favourite event in backstroke is probably 100 backstroke, but in long course.
See, I think they're two completely brilliant choices, actually. I think my choice would be breaststroke. I think most people know that the only stroke that I could actually swim competitively was breaststroke. And I think I will go for 100 metres breaststroke. I felt like that for me was the easier of the 3 breaststroke distances. What about your least favourite swimming stroke?
When I was younger, it was probably butterfly, but I then sort of grew into being quite good at that, and I didn't really have a least favourite stroke. Unless it came down to 200s, I would never do a 200 butterfly.
Backstroke. My backstroke is just diabolical. When I was younger to now, it's not changed.
I wonder if you could both share a funny story about something that happened during a competition. Maybe any mistakes that you made or any disqualifications from races.
Probably at Ponds Forge, we was doing long course and I was doing a 200 IM, and my hat came off. I didn't really know what to do, so just sort of carried on swimming, but it was just quite funny because it was really embarrassing at the end when I had to then go and collect my hat from the middle of the pool.
I think mine was probably at Corby for regionals, and I had the 100 fly final. I twitched on the block and got disqualified, but wasn't aware I was disqualified, so when I'd finished and I was over the moon that I'd placed second and saw the scoreboard, I was absolutely gutted.
So how did you feel in that moment? You had worked so hard to make it to that competition, and to have it all taken away from you by just one small mistake. How did you come back from that?
Yeah, it was absolutely heartbreaking. I was so upset about it, but Mark was really good and supportive, and he told me where it happened and where I need to improve, so we learnt from it.
And with your hat then, did that moment distract you from the rest of your race?
I chose to sort of ignore the fact that my hat came off, but obviously my hair was sort of everywhere, it was in my face. It made me a lot slower.
I think it's only fair that I share my embarrassing story as well. So I think if I look back to the National Arena League, that was one of the biggest competitions that we did as younger competitive swimmers. And we travelled miles and miles away from Gainsborough to a place called Thetford. And as part of the Arena League, you had to be part of a relay. And I travelled all that way out to participate in this relay with the rest of my age group, and got confused what race it was, so decided during a freestyle relay to start swimming breaststroke. It wasn't until I got a shout from one of the coaches that I should revert back to front crawl, and unfortunately got disqualified in the process. So I found that rather embarrassing. I travelled all this way out to this gala to perform for everybody, and obviously in that time you earned points, and yeah, it wasn't the greatest feeling, but again, you look back and actually now I find it quite funny. So I want to take you back to the start of your swimming career. Can you both give a little insight into how you started and when you started your journey?
I started with swimming lessons here, and then I joined Gainsborough at the age of 8, 9ish. Started doing competitions. I had Mark as my coach, and then progressed until I moved clubs at the age of 14, and then again at the age of 18 for university.
I can't remember fully when I first started. I know I started swimming when I was very, very little, and my older brother Aaron, he was doing competitive swimming at the time, so we sort of got put straight into the club, and I've been with the Gainsborough Dolphins ever since.
Fantastic. So what age was your first competition then? Because obviously if you started at the age of 8 and 9, do you kind of remember when you started?
For me, I did competitions when I was like really little, like 5 or 6, and we just did like the little club champs, just starting like half a length, one length. My first ever sort of like actual competition, it was obviously really nerve-wracking. It was my first race, and I was only doing one race, I think, and I actually dived in early. I think I was 8 years old. Safe to say I learnt my lesson and never did it again.
It was really nerve-wracking. I think my first one was club champs here. So I had all the older ones like Lydia basically telling me when I was going around and what I was swimming and making sure I was okay, which was really supportive and nice. But yeah, it was really scary for like a 9-year-old to be doing their first gala and diving off the block and not actually knowing what they're doing or understanding the sport in itself.
It's great because I think the best thing for a younger one to do is to be within a club, and just doing the club championships is a great starting point. I must say that when we do club champs here, and I hope you both agree, the atmosphere of a club champs is just so much better than a big gala. You feel as part of a family, you feel part as a group. Do you think doing a club champs really early on has an impact on the rest of your swimming time?
I think it makes going to the bigger competitions less scary. It doesn't seem that big of a deal because obviously you've done one with the people around you that support you, and they're going to be at those bigger ones with you. It's just that you've gone from training and racing in the same pool to, going to Ponds Forge or going out and about and racing in other pools. Fantastic.
Does the 50-metre pool at Ponds Forge throw you off by any point? Just because it's so long as a child, does it change the way that you race? Does it change the way that you see the pool?
For me, a little bit. Obviously, it's a lot bigger. You sort of, like, for me, when I was younger, like, I got to 25 metres and I had a bit, like, you get sort of like a mini break, like, while you're turning. You don't get that in a 50-metre pool, especially when you're doing, like, the longer distance races in a 50-metre pool. It can be sort of a bit more tiring. So it is a little bit more scary, but once you've done it once, it just becomes normal after that.
What kind of galas and races do you both remember competing at? I mean, obviously for younger swimmers it's always scary when competing, especially when it's your first gala or a first open meet, because I know as a club especially, we are pushing to get a lot more younger swimmers to compete at level 3 meets this year, after having a taste of competitive swimming at club championships last year. And to be fair, our swimming calendar is becoming quite packed already, and it's only April. So I'm kind of excited to see what the younger swimmers do. Do you remember any advice that was given to you as a younger swimmer? Was there any influence from any particular coaches at the time?
Most of the advice when you were like younger was like just go and enjoy it. Obviously, you got your little pointers, like touch with 2 hands, like make sure you finish on your back and things like that. But the main piece of advice when you were just starting out was just enjoy it. Especially when I was younger, we had lots of like older swimmers around as well, and they would always be stood there supporting you.
Yeah, I think it's all about like the community and the support within. Like Gainsborough's a family. Like they'll always allow you back in. Like it doesn't matter what happens, and they're really supportive and encouraging. So if you have any questions, the older swimmers will always answer them and make sure you understand what you're doing. Like Lydia said, the two-handed touches, finishing on your back if it's a backstroke event, just making sure that there's not any silly mistakes that could get you DQ'd.
Fantastic. And if you were to look back, what advice would you give your 9-10-year-old self, or younger, I suppose, who is looking at their first competition this year?
Do your best and just enjoy it.
Yeah, have fun and just try not to panic as much, because when you panic, you're just there to have fun. It's not the end all.
So I suppose as a younger swimmer, your first target is the county championships for your area. Lydia, can I kind of ask you to summarise what the county championships are and what you need to do to get there?
So the county championships is a gala for swimmers for us, Lincolnshire. There's set times that you have to achieve in certain strokes and distances to qualify, and it's where you're going to compete against sort of the best in Lincolnshire or your county for a specific distance and race. To get there, you're going to have to work very, very hard, listen to your coaches, and compete at regular open meets. So there's a qualifying window for county championships. Sometimes you're not going to get the time straight away, so you've got to keep competing in order to give yourself a better chance of getting there.
And then, Amelia, if I could kind of extend the question out to you and ask you what the regional championships are and what does it take to actually make it there?
So the next step up from counties is the regionals. There's a set of times that you need to try and get as well. So like Lydia said, you'll be doing more open meets, you'll be aiming these times. So for you guys, it's the East Mids. You'll end up swimming at Corby or Ponsforge, and basically you just race as fast as you can. You get the times for the qualifying, and then you just basically race it again there just as fast, maybe a bit faster. You listen to your coaches, listen to any advice that other swimmers give you, because you can learn from their mistakes.
How did you both find it trying to qualify for these championships? Was it easy?
No, definitely not. Especially when you're younger, I feel like the times can be a little bit more challenging. So you've definitely got to try and get out and compete as much as you can to give yourself that chance of PBing. If you're not competing very often, you're less likely to PB more, and give yourself a better chance of getting those times. Definitely training. If you're not training to win, in a sense, and you're not training to the best of your ability, you're not going to get those PBs and get those times.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to get there, and it's difficult to maintain the stamina to race well as there. So I definitely recommend working hard consistently and just making sure you have the mentality of, I want to be there, I want to win, I want to do well, I want to PB, because if you don't want any of that stuff, then there's not really any point of racing at that high level.
Yeah, I can certainly say that I found it rather difficult personally, because to be honest, I would kind of label myself as a one-trick pony. I could really only compete in breaststroke events. I mean, the 50 metres, the 100 metres, 200 metres was the only ones that I ever qualified for at counties. I can't say really that the other strokes were my thing. What events did you guys qualify in?
I pretty much qualified for every single race apart from the 200 metres fly, which I swam once when I was younger and refused to ever swim it again. I didn't swim everything at counties. I did sort of pick specific races, but I did pretty much qualify for everything.
I'm like Lydia. I qualified for everything apart from the 400 IM and long distance freestyle events. But like Lydia, I picked and chose what was best to suit me on the 2 days that we were competing.
I know, Lydia, you most recently joined our senior swimmers to compete at the most recent Lincolnshire County Championships. You joined the medley and the freestyle relay. How was that experience for you?
It was quite nice to be back in the pool competing, actually. So I was competing at Louth, which locally was one of my favourite pools. It was also nice to not be far off the times I used to swim, which really shocked me, because it's not very often that I'm in the pool training, due to mainly coaching and obviously working. So it was quite shocking to be so close to the times that I used to swim at.
So, Amelia, it's kind of a bit different for you. You've been competing out in Manchester with their county and regionals. How did that go for you?
It went well. It was definitely different to racing in Lincolnshire and the East Mids. It's also different from Yorkshire and the North East. There's a lot more people and it's really, really quick. There's people I don't know. But it was at my home pool, like it was at the Manchester Aquatic Centre, so I knew the layout, I knew my team were there to support me, so I just kind of got my head down and carried on doing what I was there to do.
Is there a lot of difference between the qualifying times out there compared to the Lincolnshire times?
Based off the size of like the different counties and regions, the qualifying times can either be quicker or slower depending on where you come from. So Yorkshire's are slower than Lancashire's times.
And just one final question before we end part 1 of today's episode. Do you have any tips on how to make it to these competitions?
Lots and lots of hard work in and out of the pool. So when you're trying to get to these sort of big competitions, a lot of the time you've got to do the work outside of the pool. So just coming to training inside of the pool is all well and good, but for me, you've got to also work outside of the pool. So whilst I was swimming, I also did gymnastics, football, a lot of other sports, which it gave me a lot of strength, and that really helped me in terms of my swimming. And another one is definitely compete as often as you can. The more experience you get, the more likely to improve on your racing. In training, you don't get a lot of that racing experience, so being out as much as you can definitely gives you an edge.
I'd personally say it's all about like mental. It's like obviously physical and you've got to work hard like Lydia says continuously, but I think it comes down to the mentality of the swimmer as well. If you don't want to aim for those competitions, if you don't want to work hard, then I don't see how you can put yourself through the training that you need to go through to be able to reach that level of like competition.
And that marks the end of part 1 of the first episode of the Phin podcast. Please make sure you tune in, subscribe on our YouTube channel at the Phin podcast, and we will see you very shortly.